The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it? Oh, it's March 14th, Friday, March 14th. Travel starts on Monday. Woo. Busy travel schedule. All right, Emmett says, can you post your UK calendar? Everything is available on my website, yaronbrookshow.com, yaronbrookshow.com. If you scroll down, you will see all the events by date. Now, almost all my events in the UK are private. They're not public events. I'm speaking at four schools, high schools, private high schools, boarding schools, some of them. I'm speaking in Parliament with members of Parliament and House of Lords. And I'm speaking at Prosperity Institute, which is a free market think tank in London. But again, I think it's just the staff. That is Friday. And then the one thing that's available to the general public is on the Saturday, March 29th, which is a small group seminar, £250, and that is going to be on how to apply rational egoism to your life in every aspect of your life. So you can still sign up for that. I've reached, I think, the minimum that I need in order to commit to doing it. So it's on. We're definitely doing it. We will early next week. We will finalize a location and get back to everybody. Prices do go up on Monday, so please try to sign up this weekend if you're gonna come. You can sign up again on my calendar on my website, yaronbrookshow.com. There's a PayPal link to sign up. All right, today we're going to talk about Columbia University, latest from Ukraine and Russia, latest on Hamas, Bill Gates. I've got a Bill Gates story for you. Latest on the astronauts that are not yet coming home, supposed to come home now. Some bad news about construction in the United States. And bad news about intelligence. Not military intelligence, problem-solving skills of our existing population. Whoops, why is this not working? My web tracker is not working. Let me reboot it. All right, it wants to go through this process again. All right, give me a second. All right, so we're going to talk about all that. Again, I'm reminding you of my event in London, March 29th. You can find information on yaronbrookshow.com. If you are in the UK, or if you want to come to the UK for this, please sign up. It's going to be fun. 4 hours, 1 to 5 p.m. London time. And you know, if you're around, we can go for drinks or something afterwards. Grab a bite. So if you're interested, so it'll be a good time to hang out and talk about how to apply this philosophy to our lives. What else? If you're in Israel, there's an event in Israel with me. Oh, if you're in Scotland, I'm doing an event on the following Monday. So 30th, 29th, 31st. 31st, Monday the 31st at St. Andrews University. I'll be at St. Andrews University giving a talk, I think on inequality or on morality of capitalism, one of those two. Again, look at my schedule online, yaronbrookshow.com. So if you're in Edinburgh or in that region, come on over. I'll be taking the train from Edinburgh to St. Andrews for the talk. And then I'll be in Israel on Wednesday that week, 2nd of April, giving a talk in Tel Aviv. Again, I think all that information is on my website, so yaronbrookshow.com. If you're in Israel, would love to have you there. Would love to say hello. Again, maybe we can go to drinks afterwards. So please show up to the event. And in Israel, Beit Sionei America is the location in Tel Aviv. All right. Should we jump in? I guess we'll jump in. Let's jump in. I'm going to jump in, not with the first story, which is Columbia University, but just, I mean, the Trump administration is the administration that keeps on giving. If you find, I mean, it's the most entertaining. I guess you could call it the most entertaining administration ever. I mean, every day somebody in the administration comes out with some just ridiculous, bizarre statement that, what are they talking about? What is this about? So you might know that Trump said the other day that, yeah, he thinks that Greenland is going to be annexed. He thinks that Greenland is going to be American. I mean, he didn't commit to anything, didn't say how, didn't say where the military force would be used. Just, yeah, it's likely. It's going to be part of America. Trust me. Anyway, Commerce Secretary Howard Ludwig, the lead for all the ridiculous things the administration stands for in the media, he goes out in the media and defends them and argues for them. He's a nutcase. Anyway, he was on Fox Business, and this is what he had to say about Greenland. And just remember, the reason Greenland is part of Denmark, did you ever think about that? Why is Greenland part of Denmark? Because Eric the Red was this Viking, right? He was kicked out of Denmark for murdering people. He went to Iceland. He was kicked out of Iceland for murdering people. He goes to Greenland, and what does he do? He murders people and takes over Greenland. So I'm not sure what Secretary Ludwig is trying to convey here. That really Greenland belongs to the Eskimos and it was expropriated by these evil Vikings that murdered its population, or we should give it back to the Eskimos and then the Eskimos can give it to America. Or, hey, Greenland was taken by force. We can take Greenland by force. But anyway, if you want to study history, if you want to know the history of the world, I suggest tuning in. Eskimo is not the right name. I know there's another name, starts with an I think. Inuits, something like that. But anyway, locals. Native Greenlanders, the natives, Inuits. But why is Eskimo not good? Is Eskimo not politically correct, or is it really not good? Like there's Eskimo somewhere else. I don't know. But native Greenlanders, I think that's a better term. Native Greenlanders versus those evil Vikings. What was this? 600 years ago, 700 years ago, something like that, 800 years ago. And it's just, that's how Denmark got it. And we can change history. We can take it. So if you want to learn history, tune into the Trump channel, or you can always listen to Joe Rogan interviewing Holocaust kind of deniers, Hitler apologists, which is what he did recently. Never should you listen to Joe Rogan podcast again. If you're a subscriber, please do yourself a favor and humanity a favor and civilization a favor. Unsubscribe. You should not sanction those who sanction Hitler apologists. But anyway, the right these days is trying to compete with the 1619 Project in rewriting history. 1619 Project tried to rewrite history, American history, by claiming it was founded on slavery, America. And the right now, the alt-right, the new right, the Rogan right, I don't know what you want to call it. I didn't even know Rogan was right. He used to be a fan of Bernie Sanders. But the Rogan right now wants to give a second chance to Hitler, wants to rethink our relationship with the Nazis. That is where we are. Left and right want to change history to suit their agenda, let's call it. Its agenda. On your website, it says March 18th and March 17th for your new, North Carolina meeting. I'm not sure what it says, but I don't know what you guys are talking about. Anyway, the North Carolina event is on Monday. Monday is the 17th. So it's on the 17th in the evening. I'm not sure what the 18th is. I come home on the 18th. But the event is on the 17th. All right. Columbia University. I mean, this is a major story, and it's. I'll talk about this tomorrow. Tomorrow we're doing a show on how would I improve the Constitution. That's pretty arrogant of me, but how I would improve the Constitution, and this is one of the ways I would improve the Constitution. Once the government gets involved in education, at any level, once it starts funding education, once it starts funding professors to do research at education institutions, once the government is involved in our universities, funding scholarships, giving tuition, whatever it happens to be, whatever means happens to be, it's going to lead to disaster. It's going to lead to disaster. I think ultimately, you can probably trace back some of the woke craziness, the DEI nuttiness, to government grants granted to particular faculty members to study particular things that have to do, that generated kind of an energy behind this, and it became popular to study this and get PhDs in this and do research on this because the government was funding it. But of course, the reverse also works. So the United States government is pissed off at American universities, as we all should be. I'm not sure the government should be, but we all should be. For basically the blatant anti-Semitism being expressed on university campuses by the left. But more than that, the faculty's adoption of these incredibly insane positions around woke, around DEI, around oppressor-oppressed, intersectionality, from which the anti-Semitism has been born, if you will, or has been resurrected. And this administration is pissed off at that. And it's not surprising. And a lot of course, the donors to this administration were the people who kind of started cutting off donations to particular universities. But this administration, this kind of administration, doesn't just get pissed off. They go and do something about it. And this is where it gets very scary. Okay, so the United States General Service Administration, GSA, alongside the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services, have sent a letter to Columbia University administration notifying them of what's going to be required if they're going to start getting their federal funding again. So why the Health and Human Services? Because they were funding a lot of science, biology, health-related research at Columbia University. And they've cut all that science, they've cut all that funding off. So no research funding is going to the university, including STEM. So they're saying, okay, here's what you have to do if you want to get your funding back. Funding that in an ideal capitalist society wouldn't exist. So here's what they want. One, enforce existing disciplinary policies. Okay. Who gets to interpret whether they're being enforced or not? Okay, put that to the side. Primacy of the president in disciplinary matters. So now the government is telling Columbia University how to determine disciplinary matters and make the president primary. I don't see how that's any of the government's business. The government wants Columbia to enforce time, place, and manner rules. Well, so now they're not only saying enforce existing disciplinary policy, but have new disciplinary policies. They want the university to have a mask ban if the masks are being used to, hide the identity of, I guess, protesters, students. Again, government interfering in a private institution's discipline policies. Deliver plan to hold all students groups accountable. Okay. Here's where it gets really dicey, I think. Formalize, adopt, and promulgate a definition of anti-Semitism. Really? And who should approve this definition? And why is it needed? I mean, it'd be good to have if they're going to accuse certain students of anti-Semitism, and if anti-Semitism is banned speech on campus, which is appropriate, right? It's a private campus. Well, but is it? It's getting government money. It's part of the confusion, right? Empower internal law enforcement. Deliver a plan for comprehensive admission reform. So again, the government is now dictate admissions. Admissions. In addition to that, they are requiring the university to put on probation. Certain departments. So immediately place the Middle Eastern studies, South Asian studies, and African studies departments under an academic receivership. Nobody knows what that means, what academic receivership is, for a minimum of 5 years. Now, what does that mean? So why these departments? I mean, the Middle East department is a horrible department. It's one of the most anti-Israel, it was basically made famous by Edward Said, who is one of the founders of the DEI. One of the founders of the post-colonialism movement. And it's just terrible. But it's, within academic circles, one of the most highly regarded academic departments. They publish a huge amount. I mean, the whole field is corrupt. But should the government have an opinion about that? No, these departments you have are corrupt. Now, this all gets very murky because the government's giving the money. It gives the money in the form of loans to students, scholarships to students. It gives the university money in the terms of grants for research. Some of those probably just horrible and should immediately be stopped in the humanities, but some of them STEM, which I also think ultimately should be stopped, but is not, I don't think is a high priority, primarily because, the government is the funder of STEM today in America. We should phase it out. We should get rid of it. But that is the reality. Why single out Columbia, not other universities? Because Columbia is being managed and saying things this government doesn't like. What happens when, I don't know, President, I don't know, pick a Democratic, what happens when President AOC, in 10 years, decides to put on probation the political science departments of certain universities because they're teaching what she considers racist, dogmatic, horrific, pro-slavery, I don't know, whatever, anti-1619 propaganda. What happens when the government starts dictating what is being taught at universities? What happens when somebody in the government decides that this guy who went on Rogan, this idiot who went on Rogan, should get a teaching position to teach us about a reevaluation of Hitler? Do we really want the government, even if we agree in this particular case, stepping into Columbia and saying, these departments, they need to be in receivership. We'll only release them from receivership, whatever that means. Nobody knows exactly. When we like the content they're teaching. Who is the we that likes the content they're teaching? Isn't this abridging the free speech of the university? What happened to the First Amendment? Is the fact that you get government money, does that mean you don't have a First Amendment right for your own speech? This is, again, I hope Colombia sues. I hope this goes to courts. I hope we get some kind of resolution here. But really, the only resolution is to get the government out of education. The only real resolution is to stop funding the universities. Now, it's a good time to remind you that Colombia is probably sitting on a massive endowment of tens of billions of dollars. Why can't they use that instead of the government funding? I mean, it would be amazing, truly amazing, even if it's done in the name of the left, for Colombia to tell the government to go shove it. And they might. And they might. But this is the kind of issues, the kind of problems, the kind of dilemmas you get when you allow government funding of education. What should we teach? What the government approves, what parents want, what the professors want, what the administration want, And again, I don't like anything that's taught in Middle Eastern studies at Columbia. I assume I won't like anything in Southern Asian African studies. I don't even know what they teach in Southern Asian studies. So this is India, Thailand, Southern Asia. I don't know what's offensive there. Pakistan, Afghanistan, I don't know. African studies, I get. Middle East studies, I kind of get. African studies, I assume, is just 16, 19. But I'm sure I don't like what they teach. Okay? And I don't like the fact that my taxpayer money is going to make that possible. True. So stop funding those departments. Stop funding the university. I don't know what you do about STEM. Maybe you stop STEM funding for all universities. You just do the NIH. But the NIH is the one granting these. I mean, this is where the scientists are. Where are the scientists? They're at the universities. So yes, ultimately, that's what you want to do. You want to stop all government funding of all research. But that's going to be a while before that happens. And America can recover from it. We can do it now, but I'm not sure we recover. By the way, a lot of other countries right now, France, UK, a few other countries, actually actively engaged in poaching American scientists and saying, hey, if you come here, you can do research on anything you want. Funding is secure. You won't have to worry. It would be interesting if we had a brain drain going out of America. Usually the brain drains are coming into America. It would be interesting if we had a brain drain going out of America. All right, that is a story to watch. We will see what Columbia University does. It has ramifications for academic life and for the university and for free speech that we're going to feel for, I think, a very long time. So it's an important story that's going to be super interesting to see actually what happens. All right. So as you know, Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire agreement, and Russia yesterday, Putin kind of hummed and hawed and said he agrees, but under lots of conditions. And then Witkoff met with Putin after his press conference. And today, President Trump commented on the meeting Witkoff had with Putin. And as always, I'd like to read you the original Donald Trump because he conveys his thoughts so clearly and so articulately that, and with so much truth, that it's always good to hear it from, as we say, the moron's mouth. Donald Trump said, we had very good and productive discussions with President Vladimir Putin of Russia yesterday. And there is a very good chance that this horrible, bloody war can finally come to an end. And now it's all caps. But at this very moment, thousands of Ukrainian troops are completely surrounded by the Russian military and in a very bad and vulnerable position. No more all caps. I have strongly requested to President Putin that their lives be spared. This would be a horrible massacre, one not seen since World War II. God bless them all. Now, what do you make of this? Donald Trump, as usual, adopts wholeheartedly, fully, Russian propaganda talking points. The idea that thousands of Ukrainian troops are completely surrounded by the Russians is just not a reality. The Ukrainians are being defeated in Kursk and actually leaving Kursk. And Russia has already occupied most of its territory in Kursk, and there are a few pockets left, and the Ukrainians are slowly retreating back to their side of the border. But no troops are surrounded. Thousands of troops are not in a vulnerable position where they're going to be slaughtered. Indeed, horrible massacres have already occurred in this war. I don't see Donald Trump mentioning those where Putin has actually urged his troops to kill as many people as possible, and they have already happened. But note the effect here. One is he's accepting wholeheartedly Russia propaganda. But second, he's not putting Putin in a position where Putin can do a favor. You know what Putin will say? I'm not going to kill all those poor Ukrainians. I'm going to let them go back to Ukraine. And I'm going to do this, President Bush, as a favor to you. Because you are so strong. You are so good. You are such a great president. And I am so afraid of you that I will do this as a personal favor to you. But just remember, I want something in return. I really want, 4 provinces of Ukraine in return. Did I say Bush? I meant Trump. Another weak, pathetic president, Bush. But given Trump, I'm kind of missing. Anyway, that's the effect of what this statement says. It's an opportunity for Putin to do Trump a favor. And that's what's going to happen. If you actually look at a map of the occupation, basically the Ukrainian troops have withdrawn or been pushed back out of most of the area that they originally occupied. A major city called Sudzha, which was a big achievement when Ukraine conquered it months ago, is now being recaptured by the Russians, or at least the Russians are claiming it's being recaptured, but there's good reasons to believe that. And basically, Ukraine occupies tiny slivers of territory within Russia, but they are clearly retreating back to the borders. Indeed, Zelensky today announced, and I think, again, I'm not sure this might be very much, Ukrainian propaganda, but Zelensky basically said today that it's okay. We never intended to stay in Kursk. It's achieved what we wanted it to do. Basically, the Kursk offensive was targeted at diverting troops away from the offensives in Donetsk, where they were making real progress, and in Kharkiv, where they weren't making progress, but where I think the Ukrainians were worried that they would open another front. And he said, look, that has been achieved. That has been achieved. The fighting in Donetsk, which is true, is basically, it's a stalemate, and Ukrainians have actually made some gains in the last week or so. And in Kharkiv, the border, nothing's changed. The Russians are stalled and have not moved at all. But the reality is that Zelensky would have much preferred going into any possible negotiations with Putin, having occupied Kursk and having, what did Trump call it, cards I'll give you back this piece of Russia if you give me back that piece of Ukraine. So it's definitely a weaker position to not have that. But I do think it worked in a sense of diverting troops from Donetsk, and indeed the major city that the Russians were going to seemed on the verge of occupying in the Donetsk province. It starts with a P, but I can't pronounce it. Is basically, call it being saved, basically has, it seems like a lot less likely that Russia will indeed occupy this territory right now. All right, let's see. A number of, a lot of people are making fun of Trump. Does Trump not read his intelligence reports? And the answer to that, I think, is pretty uniformly no, he doesn't. If he had, the intelligence reports would have showed him that the Ukrainians are not surrounded. But he does not. So there's a lot of making fun of Trump as a consequence of that tweet. Let's see some other things that are happening. The United States continues to basically give Russia pre-negotiation everything Russia has asked for. And it really, really, really looks like the Americans are making an effort to do that. That is, it's not like squeezed out of them, but they're going out of their way to tell the Russians, yep, your demands are going to be met. We're going to give you what you want in a peace deal. So, for example, yesterday, Mike Waltz, who's the National Security Advisor, was on Hannity, and Hannity says, I would imagine parts, maybe Donbass region in particular, or areas that are heavily populated by people from Russia, even that is such a giveaway, that would go to Putin in any negotiated settlement. Am I wrong? Now, notice, that is to be negotiated. And Waltz says, you're not wrong in any of that. These people have gone to negotiating school from the school of losers, the school of giving your enemy everything it wants before you even negotiate. It's truly astounding. And I know, I'm missing the plot, and there's really a 5D chess here. But no, there isn't. This is just negotiating amateurism and unbelievable stupidity. I'll give you one other example. Keith Kellogg, who was Trump's special envoy for the war in Ukraine, and who is a former general and very knowledgeable about Ukraine and very pro-Ukraine and very anti-Russia, has been removed from the peace negotiating team because the Russians didn't want him to be on the American team negotiating against him because he was, quote, too pro-Ukraine. So let's take the most pro-Ukraine person on the team and sideline him as a sign to the Russians that we're going to be really tough with them. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And then today, the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, R-U-T-T-E, the former Prime Minister of Netherlands, visited Donald Trump and had a very constructive conversation with Donald Trump about NATO and all things NATO, and basically came out of the meeting and stated unequivocally that Ukraine accession to NATO is, quote, no longer under consideration. I mean, just yesterday, they were still under consideration. Still under consideration yesterday. But he met with Trump, and Trump whipped him and said, no, it's a much stronger negotiating position if we give this one to the Russians before we even negotiate. And in addition to that, Rutte, and I don't know how you pronounce it, emphasized that we need a peace deal and that normalizing ties with Russia would eventually be on the table. So let's give him everything. Why even negotiate? Putin, please make a list of the things you want and we'll just sign it. We'll just sign it. 70 chess. All right, let's see. Couple of stories kind of peripherally related to this that we've talked about in the last few days, weeks. So Portugal was planning to buy F-35s to upgrade its kind of obsolete, or not obsolete, but aging F-16s as part of its, modernization of its Air Force and its commitments vis-a-vis NATO. Well, they have changed their mind. They have decided to quote their, defense minister, quote, "The world has already changed. There were elections in the U.S. There was a position in relation to NATO and the world stated by the Secretary of Defense and by the U.S. President himself, which must also be taken into account in Europe and in what concerns Poland. And this ally of ours, which has always been predictable over the decades, could bring limitations to the use, maintenance, components, and everything that has to do with ensuring that aircraft will be operational and used in all types of scenarios. And therefore, they're not going to buy F-35s because they're afraid of restrictions that the United States would place on their use. They're now looking at European airplanes built by Europeans to replace the F-16s. My guess is they'll also look at the South Korean airplane, but no more F-35s. I have a feeling that the maker of the F-35s in the United States is not very happy. They spent a lot of money lobbying in Washington. A lot of money. This is part of the military-industrial complex. And they can't be happy that Donald Trump is now losing them business. But I talked about that possibility of that happening yesterday or the day before. Well, there it is. It's already happening. David said it's Lockheed Martin. Yep, that sounds right. So it's Lockheed Martin cannot be happy about this. Not at all. One other story we covered a week ago or so was that, if you remember, Germany, the two centrist parties in Germany is CDU and CSU, which will probably form the next government. Before even coalition deals were happening, they had already decided that they were going to go for this big fund where they were going to exclude this fund from the debt limitations that German law places on it, and they were going to change that law to allow this fund to happen. They couldn't quite do it just the two parties because they need, I think, a supermajority. I think it's 2/3. So they needed one other political party in order to join them in doing this. So basically what they did is they went to the Green Party and said, look, part of the money we raise using this debt, independent of the debt break, which is what they call this law, will be used for climate action, climate change stuff. I don't know what. So will you agree to getting rid of the debt break? And basically today, I think, or yesterday, it was announced that the Greens have joined them. So now they have the supermajority that they need. This deal will exempt defense spending from Germany's debt break when it exceeds 1% of GDP, and allocates funds for defense, infrastructure, and climate action, potentially totaling up to 1 trillion euro. That's a lot of money. Merz, the incoming German chancellor, has publicly emphasized Germany's readiness to defend peace in Europe, peace through strength, that is building up the German military. So $1 trillion is going to be raised. It's going to go mostly for defense, but there will be money there for the infrastructure. This is a massive fiscal stimulus, Keynesian stimulus, to a German economy that is in recession. Of course, this is not good economically. It's just a way of shifting money from one pocket to another. Keynesian stimuluses are not sustainable long term, and they don't actually work. They might work in the very short run, but they don't actually work. But defense spending is necessary. The infrastructure, who knows what that even means, and climate change is just throwing money away. But that's what you have to do in order to get the Greens on board in order to pass this new law. But is this German stimulus like the broken window analogy? Yes. All fiscal stimuluses are like the broken window analogies, yes. Any money the government is borrowing in order to do this is money not going to the private sector to do something more productive. Unless they print money, which creates inflation, it is truly a zero-sum game. Money doesn't grow on trees. It does, in a sense that it can be printed, but there are consequences even to that. All right. As you know, the Trump administration continues to find ways to negotiate with Hamas. There was a negotiation face-to-face between an American representative and Hamas, something the Biden administration never engaged in. But the Trump administration, deal, no matter what, has no problem engaging it. It was Trump, after all, who went and kissed the ring of the brutal dictator of North Korea. She has no problem negotiating directly and face-to-face with monsters. So he had an emissary of his go and talk to Hamas. The guy came out and talked about, this was disclosed. The Israelis were very unhappy. Direct negotiations with Hamas is viewed by the Israelis and most Americans as unacceptable. To me, unacceptable is any negotiating with Hamas. Doing it through an intermediary doesn't change the fact that you're legitimizing them. But anyway, this was like a new low, and it was criticized by the Israelis, criticized by some in the U.S. The guy who actually did negotiating came out and he talked about it, and he actually called the Hamas kind of, they were nice guys, the people I talked to, whatever. And people just blew up at that. He has been fired, so he was fired. But negotiations with Hamas still continue. And what Hamas has figured out is what Donald Trump really cares about, seemingly, is the one American hostage that Hamas still has. So Hamas has 22 live hostages and maybe 30-something bodies of hostages. Of the 22 live hostages, one is a dual citizen, American-Israeli citizen. And Hamas has figured out this is what Trump really cares about. So today, Israel's been saying, you want a continuation of the ceasefire? Release 10 of the hostages. And then we'll extend the ceasefire about 2 months. I think that was the proposal the Americans put on the table. Hamas came back and said, how about we release the one American to get Trump off our backs and 4 bodies, and we extend the ceasefire for another couple of months. So Hamas has got it. They've kind of figured out what the Americans really want, and what Trump seems to really care about, and forget everything else. So we'll see. Israel's blasted this proposal, rejected it. Supposedly it's been rejected by Steve Witkoff, the Trump envoy, who did not negotiate directly, but negotiates through an envoy, through an intermediary. Anyway, we'll see. Now, Witkoff had proposed, again, 10 living hostages released immediately, and a ceasefire till the end of Passover, and the release of all other hostages if an agreement is reached on ending the war. Israel accepted the Witkoff proposal. Hamas rejected it and came back with this proposal. So negotiations still at a stalemate. And this idea that if the hostages aren't released tomorrow, we will rain hell on Gaza, we still wait for that red line to be lived up to by the Trump administration. Probably never. I think it's pretty safe to say that is probably never in terms of when that will actually happen. All right, what did I close? I closed a window I probably shouldn't have. Maybe this one. All right, that is a quick update on Hamas. A quick update on Bill Gates. I know you guys are very curious about Bill Gates. But this relates to Bill Gates' philanthropy. Bill Gates, as you know, has been a massive contributor to a lot of causes and a lot of funding of science, by the way, and a lot of venture capital support for science. But he's also supported a lot of, quote, science and a lot of advocacy through his nonprofit. He is one of the biggest private supporters of climate change initiatives in the world. Well, it turns out that the institute that he had founded to study and support climate change and climate giving, called the Breakthrough, I think it's called Breakthrough Energy, which was a climate change nonprofit, Breakthrough Energy. It sounds like it has fired all its people, locked its doors, and shut down. Tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of support for various green initiatives have basically been eliminated. And Bill Gates, it seems, has completely withdrawn, at least withdrawn here. He might be giving somewhere else, from energy-related or climate change-related giving. Now, this could be part of Bill Gates' agenda to befriend and be nice to Trump. It could be that he never believed in this stuff and did it in order to be popular, in order to appease the powers to be. And since the powers to be have changed until now, appeasing means something else, he is shifting what he's giving, and he's eliminating this. Hard to tell, but it is interesting. And I think it's safe to say that if Kamala or Biden were president right now, Bill Gates probably wouldn't be doing this. This is probably him figuring out that he doesn't need to suck up to the left anymore, at least not in this particular way. So, thought that was interesting. And sad. Bill Gates generally is, I think, just sad. All right, you remember the story of the two NASA astronauts that flew into the space station with a Boeing spacecraft and were supposed to come back with it, and then NASA came to the conclusion the spacecraft was not safe, and they worried about re-entry, and they told the two astronauts to stay where they are, and they basically been there for months. Well, it turns out that NASA's looked at a number of plans to get them back, basically primarily by hiring SpaceX to send up one of its rockets that it sends periodically with astronauts to the space station and bring them back. And they've looked at various options over the months, and it seems like, at least according to NASA, all those options were too expensive, and instead they decided to wait for a scheduled mission, which was supposed to take off yesterday, to the space station and use that scheduled mission to bring the two astronauts back. Remember, these astronauts have been there for months. They were supposed to be there for days. Anyway, yesterday, SpaceX was supposed to take off and bring them back. At the last minute, after the astronauts were strapped in and everything, they aborted because there was some leak in some valve in something. So it looks like they will try again. But it is one of the things that makes the story interesting is that Elon Musk is lying about it constantly. It's like Biden abandoned the astronauts. Biden didn't want to bring them back. All this BS stuff, politicizing everything he can. Even when politics has nothing to do with it. And, it does look like these astronauts hopefully will come back safely. They're hoping that the Falcon 9 launch which was supposed to happen yesterday, will happen soon, and that these astronauts will be back home safely. But note how Musk has managed to politicize even this. Pretty pathetic. Pretty pathetic. Launch window right now is this evening. So we should know in a few hours whether the launch has happened or not. But I have to say it is cool, though. They've been up in space for 9 months, by the way. I would say it's pretty cool that we got a private space company going up and bringing astronauts back and forward. And the whole thing of NASA privatizing all of that is very cool and very good. What else? Yeah, 2 final stories. Yeah, well, 3. I've got one other on top of that. There's an article out which is interesting and sad at the same time. I'll just read you a segment of this because it really shows the real problems that we face in the United States have nothing to do with foreign competition. They have nothing to do with trade. They have nothing to do with tariffs or anything like that. And they have everything to do with us crippling ourselves. This is an article in Foreign Affairs by Brian Deese, who's a innovation fellow at MIT. And this is a segment of it. It has become too hard and too expensive to build physical things in the United States. Construction productivity has fallen 40% in the past 50 years. Fallen 40%. That's insane. And infrastructure construction costs are now more than double the OECD, that is other countries, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, average. Double what other countries do, developed countries. Partly as a result, the United States is no longer a leader in many cutting-edge manufacturing industries. Regulatory challenges further exacerbate the difficulties. It takes years to complete the federal permitting process for projects requiring an environmental impact statement, the most comprehensive form of environmental review, and years in some cities to permit a multifamily housing project. Now notice that one of the things the EPA is deregulating is these environmental impact statements, at least at the federal level, and that could make a massive difference to all this. He continues, in California, environmental review lawsuits have sought to block the permitting of nearly half of all proposed housing units. No matter, not surprising that there is a housing shortage and therefore ever increasing prices of housing in California. Half of all proposed housing units are blocked because of environmental review. So not only do you have to do the review, then there are lawsuits, and it goes on and on and on and on forever. He continues, building is often mistakenly treated as a second or third tier macroeconomic issue. In an economy fueled increasingly by services and intellectual property, it's commonly thought that growth and innovation are driven by advances in knowledge-based sector. But expanding the United States' capacity to build is not just about bricks and mortar. Making enough affordable housing, generating sufficient electricity, and supporting cutting-edge technology development are necessary for innovation and productivity growth. As the economist Ed Glazer has said, quote, restricting construction ties cities to their past and limits the possibilities for their future. Scaled to a national level, he continues, the consequences are enormous. Now, it's a good article. He's absolutely right. I don't agree with everything he writes, but it's absolutely right. And he actually acknowledges, even though he's not a Republican, he's not a Trumpist, that many of these goals, he says, are consistent with the rhetoric of President Donald Trump and some members of administration. But the economic policy approach of this administration seems intent on pursuing will make it harder to unleash a building boom, with tariffs driving up costs of construction, steel, and manufacturing materials, political and economic uncertainty limiting investments, and massive tax cuts furthering ballooning the deficit and raising borrowing costs. I wouldn't blame the tax cuts, I blame the spending, but okay. So this is absolutely right. America, what America needs right now, if the Trump administration really wanted a new golden era, which is what they talked about, right? When they came in, they talked about a new golden era. What they would try to do is unleash a construction boom, a building boom. And it could be construction of power plants to produce electricity, a building boom of residential housing and multifamily units to lower the cost of housing by matching supply to demand. It could be a building boom of data centers and logistics centers. And of course, as we said, the power centers to go along with them. That's what America needs right now. And to do that, you need to get rid of environmental regulations, and it looks like they might be moving in that direction. You need to get rid of zoning regulations. Maybe you can come up with some kind of federal way to eliminate zoning restrictions. That would be amazing. You've got to completely deregulate the energy sector, primarily the energy producing sector, the sector that produces electricity. Maybe we're moving in that direction. But then, and I think the author's completely right, you've got to stop the ridiculous, absurd nonsense around tariffs and the continuing creation of economic uncertainty. You've got to encourage people to come to America and invest. You got to encourage Americans to invest in America. What you want is to establish predictability and certainty and optimism and a bright American future. And together with Right and Energy and Zeldin and EPA, you've got the right deregulatory attitude. Now you need to establish the investment environment. And instead of focusing on tariffs, imagine if instead of this, the president would say, you know, we used to have tariffs on steel and aluminum and other things. That's stupid. We need cheap steel in this country. We need a lot of cheap steel in this country because we need to build. So from now on, we are going to make all tariffs on building materials of any kind, of basically all materials. We're going to make the tariffs zero. Zero. Actually, while we're at it, we're just going to make all tariffs in America zero. And watch the investment flood in. And watch the construction boom happen. And watch even manufacturing come back. And we're going to deregulate energy and deregulate environmental regulations. And we're going to deregulate labor rules so it's easier to hire and fire people. You will have a boom in production and construction and in production that I don't think people can even imagine. And if you could add to that some real, fundamental, significant immigration reform that allows in a lot more immigrants, God, this country could just take off economically into the stratosphere. Sadly, as always, my proposals will go ignored by whoever is in the White House. All right, here's a really depressing story. Like everything else is small as compared to this one. It comes from the Financial Times, and it's based on a massive study that was done. So I'm going to read you from the article. Across a range of tests that have been conducted over the last 20 years, actually 40 years, I think, the average person's ability to reason and solve novel problems appears to have peaked in the early 20-teens and has been declining ever since. I'm still reading this. Given its importance, there's been remarkably little consistent long-run research on human attention or mental capacity. But there is a rare exception. Every year since the 1980s, the Monitoring the Future study has been asking 18-year-olds whether they have difficulty thinking, concentrating, or learning new things. The share of final year high school students who report difficulties was stable throughout the 90s and 2000s, but began a rapid upward climb in mid-20-teens. This inflection point is noteworthy, not only for being similar to performance on tests of intelligence and reasoning, but because it coincides with another broader development, our changing relationship with information available constantly online. Part of what we're looking at here is likely a result of the ongoing transition away from text towards visual media, the shift towards a post-literate society spent obsessively on our screens. The decline of reading is certainly real. In 2022, the share of Americans who reported reading a book in the past year fell below half. Particularly striking, however, is that we see this alongside decreasing performance in the application of numeracy and other forms of problem solving in most countries. In one particular eye-opening statistic, the share of adults who are able to, quote, use mathematical reasoning when reviewing and evaluating the validity of statements has climbed by 25% on average in high-income countries and 35% in the United States. Who are unable has climbed to 25%. I'm shocked that it's only 25%. Because my experience during COVID and since is that something like 75% of Americans cannot reason mathematically, certainly cannot reason statistically, have no idea what math and statistics. They don't know how to. They don't know how to look at a graph. They can't use a chart, and they certainly don't know what statistics means. Anyway, that's just me. Now, this is part of, a big thing about people. The phones and digital media is corrupting us all. And maybe that's true. Maybe young kids are getting dumber because they're not reading, and maybe they're getting dumber because I don't know. Our math education is so god awful. But I suspect that this also has to do with the tests. I suspect the way kids reason today is different than the way they reasoned maybe 20 years ago. That they're better at some skills and worse at other skills. I once in a while come across a study that shows that kids who play video games are really, really good at certain things. That it develops certain skills and certain skills related to intelligence, in an astounding way. Now, maybe it's true that these kids don't have the skills that were being measured in the 90s or 2000s. They're lower in those skills, but in other skills, they're higher. Interpreting visual data, for example. So I'm just not convinced by studies like this. I wonder if they're not biased towards, older methodologies, older studies. And, I'm just always suspicious of anybody saying, yep, the latest technology, fill in the blank, whatever it is destroying the minds of our youth. Because I heard that about television when I was growing up. And then I heard it about computers, and then I heard it about gaming, and then I heard it about the internet. Now I hear it about iPhones, and I just don't find it persuasive. Now, it is true that the educational system is deteriorating. You can see that in test scores. But even there, at the top of the distribution, the smart kids, it doesn't seem to really disrupt them. They seem to somehow do fine. And they're the ones, for the most part, who drive innovation and job creation and the economy forward. All right. One last story, another one on the scary side. It turns out that the U.S. Treasury this week has lowered the currency transaction reporting threshold from $10,000 to $200 to capture information on everyone who sends cash anywhere from a few cities around the United States, San Diego, El Paso, and other places in California and some other places around the country. This is a massive new regulation. It used to be if you deposited $10,000 or withdrew $10,000 or wired $10,000, the bank had to report it. Now it's $200? Who are they trying to catch? What are they trying to do? This is a massive increase in surveillance on American citizens. Does this have to do with immigrants sending money home to Mexico, Guatemala, somewhere else? Hard to tell. I think that's what it has to do with. But it's kind of a huge, I think the $10,000 one is a massive violation of privacy, a massive violation of my rights. $200? $200 is absolutely ridiculous. And it's basically part of the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network that's supposed to catch money laundering. Is anybody money laundering in $200 increments? But this is the kind of statism, authoritarianism that maybe, typically in financial issues you'd expect from the Bidens and Obamas of the world. But no, this is Trump. This is the Trump administration. No difference. Maybe a little worse. Depressing. All right. Well, that is the news. Oh, one more thing. I wanted to correct, a story I gave you yesterday. So yesterday I talked about Binance and the Trump family trying to take a financial stake in the company, and this having to do with Changpeng Zhao, the billionaire founder of Binance, wanting out of prison. I was mistaken because he was already out of prison, but it's still basically true. So let me read you from the Wall Street Journal. Representatives of the President Trump's family have held talks to take a financial stake in the U.S. arm of crypto exchange Binance, according to people familiar with the matter, a move that would put Trump in business with the firm that pleaded guilty in 2023 to violating anti-money laundering requirements. And I'll just, as my aside, and of course, a potential huge beneficiary of the Trump administration's crypto regulations and crypto national reserve and whatever, right? So no conflict of interest at all. I continue to quote. At the time, Binance's billionaire founder, Changpeng Zhao, who served 4 months in prison after pleading guilty to a related charge, has been pushing for the Trump administration to grant him a pardon. People familiar with the matter said Zhao, widely known as CZ, remains Binance's largest shareholder. The talks began after Binance reached out to allies of Trump last year, offering to strike a business deal with the family as part of a plan to return the exiled company to the U.S. and as part of the plan to make the company part of the swamp. I think I can say that. That's legit. That's not me just mouthing off. Yeah, part of the swamp. So now the Trump family has a stake in a company that is directly going to benefit or not from the particular crypto regulations that this administration chooses to impose. All right, that is the news from March 14th. It is a Friday. Tomorrow, or this evening, starts our weekend. All right, a few announcements. Announcements that we want to make. I will have a show tomorrow. It will be about changes I would make to the Constitution. Now, not from a legal perspective, not even from a legal philosophy perspective, just based on my experience, based on my knowledge, big changes, not wordsmithing, not, I won't give language, I won't give the specifics, but just things I would like to see explicitly stated in the Constitution that I think would make it a much more powerful, much more consistent document with its original intent, or my understanding of its original intent, and maybe not, maybe what I think the intent should be, the original intent on steroids, if you will. So I will be doing that on tomorrow, Saturday. All right, let's see, what else? Yes, I know Institute is a sponsor of the show, and it is encouraging students of Objectivism interested in attending OCON, and you should be interested in attending OCON. It's a fantastic conference, and it's an exciting time. It's a lot of fun. To apply for scholarships, you can get your travel expenses covered and your hotel expenses covered. So please consider applying for a scholarship. You can do so. AynRand.org/start here. They really want you to apply for scholarship. That's a good sign. This weekend, we've got the Ayn Rand conference in Berlin. A lot of you did apply for scholarships, and a lot of you got scholarships. So there's a bunch of you out there in Berlin having a good time. I was not invited. I'm a little insulted, but I won't be there. But I hope you're having a great time, and it's going to be a great conference. There's no question it's going to be a great conference. Let's see. Alex Epstein, of course, is a sponsor of the show. alexepstein.substack.com, particularly right now. Enormous value in the Substack, in his articles, because you're getting an inside look at the thinking behind what this administration is doing when it comes to energy, climate change, and issues like that. And I think the most exciting things this administration is going to do relate to environmental deregulation and energy deregulation and things like that. So read it from somebody who's influencing the discussion. Alex Epstein, alexepstein.substack.com. All right, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I will be doing a seminar on March 29th in London on applying objectivist morality, on applying the objectivist ethics, living a life of egoism, how to apply it to relationships, love, friendship, sex, how to apply it to career, how to apply it to day-to-day living, to what you do with your life. And you can attend if you come. It's not going to be videotaped. It's not going to be broadcast. It's not going to be live streamed. It's going to be intimate. It's going to be small. I've just got a couple of new people signed up today. So we have reached the minimum to hold it. So it's definitely happening. So now register. Yeah, right. I still have a few spots available. I expect to raise the price on Monday. So try to do it before Monday. But it would be great to have you there. And I think it could be fun. Get some drinks afterwards. This will be good. This will be good. And what else? Yeah, I think, I will be on Monday in North Carolina. I see biologist, 1981 is going to be there. How cool is that? Looking forward to seeing your talk on Monday. Yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting you. That'll be cool. Make sure to come up and introduce yourself. So I will be there at the university speaking in Wilmington, North Carolina, at the University of Wilmington, at the business school. Again, information on all my events is available on yaronbrookshow.com. Just scroll down the front page, the first page, and my events will start to be listed with links to the relevant information when an event is public. When an event is public. All right. I think that's all the announcements I want to make today. Yeah, don't forget, March 29th in London. Don't miss out. One of a kind. One of a kind. Never done this seminar before. Might never do it again. Who knows? All right, let us start with David, who put $100 into the question. This is great. David says, I've read Edward Said's book, Orientalism, and didn't get an Islamist vibe from the book. I know he was pro-Palestinian, but I think he had more to do with allegiance than a religious ideology. Yeah, Edward Said was not an Islamist. That was not his ideological bent. He was a secular nationalist, if you will, and a leftist. The main thing about Orientalism is to portray the Middle East as the people of the Middle East as victims of the oppressor, victims of the colonizers, victims of Europeans, victims of the white man. It also is one of the first books to bring into this analysis of history an explicit postmodernist perspective, where truth is not what's fundamentally important, but what's fundamentally important is your perspective at the time, the people's perspective who experienced history at that time. No, I don't think they were victims. I think they were benefactors. I think they benefited enormously from the West's involvement in their lands. Indeed, Islam, before the West kind of colonized parts of it, was driving the Middle East further behind, further backwards. It is the West that gave them opportunity to accelerate economic and cultural growth, and ultimately gave them opportunity to become liberal democracies. They didn't take it, but they certainly had that opportunity. Right? My website is wrong. My North Carolina lecture is on Monday. So if it says Tuesday, it is wrong. I will, let me text my assistant to fix that. That is important to fix. Website says Monday lecture is on Tuesday. Please fix. All right. Thank you, Paul, for letting me know. And now I've let her know. So I don't think you can view them as victims. They then did not take advantage of the opportunities they were given. And they blew them. And they decided first to adopt European fascism rather than, this is the Ba'ath Party and the Arab nationalists in Egypt, instead of adopting liberal democracy. And then they decided to reject everything Western and it embraces instead Islamism. But I wouldn't say they're the victims at all. And the fact is, the Ottoman Empire lost its empire because it joined a war it should have stayed out of. World War I, it joined the side of Germany when it didn't need to join at all. Thank you, David. Dave, $50. Thank you, Dave. No question prompting your sharp redress of commonly held misconceptions in our culture today. Just enjoying your great show. Have I been rough on you, Dave? I apologize. I don't mean to be, how did you call it? Sharp redress. That's not my intention to redress you sharply. Wait. My assistant is confused. Let me just figure this out. All right. Let's see, who do we have next? Jeffrey. Jeffrey says, and I owe you an email, Jeffrey. Rereading Fountainhead, and again, in awe of Rand's understanding of psychology. Any idea how that developed? Is it discussed much among objectivists? It is discussed among objectivists, but how she got it, I don't think it came from reading books on psychology. I think she had a acute ability to do two things, which are which are rare. One is she had an amazing ability to introspect, to understand her own psychological processes, her own motivations, her own value creation, her own character. And I think it starts there, having a profound understanding of self. And then an incredible ability to observe other people and to figure out, if you will, the root causes of their behavior or their attitude or their approach to things, both philosophically, and you have to have that as well, and then understand how the philosophy, the ideology translates into a psychology or interacts with the psychology. And she had that. She had that understanding. I mean, I don't think anybody provided that to her. I don't think she read it anyway. I don't know how much psychology she read, but psychology was such an infant, was with so much infancy in those days. Arguably still is, but certainly in those days it was. That I don't think she had anything to learn from anybody. And I think, indeed, much of what Nathaniel Branden ultimately came up with in psychology is ultimately rooted in her observations of psychology. See, if anything, her psychological observations have ultimately created and fueled whatever influence on the field Nathaniel Branden had. Came from her. It came from her. Andrew, anti-Semitism is one of the biggest reversals of justice in history, taking into account the benefits Jews have brought to mankind. Is it because their productiveness that their hatred, does altruism demand this hatred? All right, guys, on my website, it shows the event in North Carolina as Monday, March 17th, talk. March 17th is 6 to 7 p.m. East Coast time. So I don't know, Paul or whoever said that it was listed on a different day. I don't know. I don't know how that is, but suddenly when I look it up and when my system looks it up, it says Monday, March 17th, and it's 6 to 7 p.m. East Coast time. So I don't know where you are, Paul, that you're seeing it as Tuesday. Maybe you're in Europe or Israel, and because of time zones, it's moving it a day in some weird calendar-related thing. I don't know. All right. That's it. Maybe a time zone. All right. So, Andrew, anti-Semitism. I mean, this requires a lecture. It requires a lot of discussion. Some of it you can find in my lectures on anti-capitalism and anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitism demands a much more thorough investigation. And the roots of anti-Semitism are far greater than just rooted in envy in their productiveness, envy in their wealth and their success and their ability. It's more than just the altruism. All of that is there. All of that exists. There's no question. But the roots of anti-Semitism are in religion. And not just any religion. They're in Christianity. The origins, the source, and the nature of anti-Semitism cannot be understood outside of anti-Semitism. The Christians hated the Jews because the Jews refused Jesus. The Christians hated the Jews because the Jews turned their back on the Messiah, on God's Son, on God, in other words. The Jews, the ultimate apostates. They had every opportunity in the world to embrace Jesus, to adopt his ideas, and they chose not to. They rejected him. And in that sense, they're worse than simple pagans. They're worse than, because he was one of them, and they're worse than anybody because he was right there. They had him. They had the opportunity to embrace, and they chose not to. So, and on top of that, arguably, they were responsible for his death. It was, Christianity has spun the story in such a way that it was not the Romans who killed Jesus. The Romans were willing to let Jesus go. It was at the Jews' insistence that they kill that they kill Jesus. The Jews were the ones who insisted on it. That's what caused it. So that is the root. But that, again, that needs a whole lecture. I want to do a whole talk on anti-Semitism, the roots of it. I'm hoping to somewhere will want me to do that and will pay me to do it, and then I'll develop that talk. I've already read one book. I want to read a few more books on anti-Semitism to really get the historical context fully. And you combine that with the usury and with the success and with the hatred of capitalism, and you combine it together, and you see why Candace Owen, every anti-Semitic rant she has is always starts and ends with Christ is King or something like that. So it's very rooted in their biblical tradition, their Christian tradition, right? All right. Let's see. Michael says, what would you consider breaking out? Getting to 100,000 subscribers, 20,000 per video. If you got on Joe Rogan or Bill Maher, that could be very doable. Even a debate with Destiny or getting on Piers Morgan would be huge. I don't buy any of that. I don't think that's true. I don't think that'll happen. I mean, I'm all for. I will do everything to go on Joe Rogan and Bill Maher, and they don't want me. That's the reality. And I'm happy to debate and eager to debate Destiny, but I will bet you real money that will not drive it to 100,000 and to 20,000 views. It just doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. Part of the reason it won't work that way is the reason Joe Rogan won't even have me on. So, we can continue to be hopeful, but I think it's much more complicated than that. I wouldn't be out of there. David says, as soon as Joe Rogan lights up a joint, Yaron would be out of there. I have no problem with him smoking a joint, as long as he doesn't expect me to smoke one too. And, Joe Rogan smoking a joint in an interview with me will only increase viewership, I think. So I'm all for that. Michael says, why weren't there enough people to stop Hitler or Trump? Not to say Trump is anywhere near as evil as Hitler, but he's clearly bad, and there aren't enough people or good people to stop this maniac. That's the argument Ayn Rand makes constantly, that it is the sanction of the good that makes evil possible, that evil is not possible, would not be possible without the good sanctioning it, without the, and a big part of the sanction is keeping quiet. So look at how many people will not unsubscribe to Joe Rogan because he interviewed a Nazi apologist. That's why. That's why, right? It doesn't take much. Make people feel the pain of their bad ideas. Make people feel the pain of sanctioning bad ideas. But we live in a world where you do not judge. Oh, Rogan is just asking questions. We should hear all answers. What are you, against free speech? But that's the approach that allows the Hitlers to rise. Nobody calls them. Nobody judges them. Nobody says how evil they really are. People are afraid to judge, afraid to stand up and speak. And a big part of the fear is a lack of understanding and knowledge of their own ideology. And part of this is the problem with religion. If your best alternative to these evil ideas is religion, then you're not going to be incredibly confident in standing up to them, because your ideas are just as groundless as theirs. Colleen says, please do a seminar in the US as you are doing in London. I thought about flying there for it, but that would be a lot of time. Yeah, it would be. How about we do this, Colleen? I'll make a deal with you. Let's do one in Denver. We need about 10 people. And let's see if we can pull it off in Denver. And I'll send you some possible dates. If I think we could pull it off in May, I've got a date in May. If we don't think we can pull it off in May, then maybe we can do it in either November or January next year. But let's do it on one of my trips to LPR, where I need to fill in and more stuff in Denver to do, and do it there. Let me know what you think. If you think it's a good idea, I can give you the date in May, and maybe you can help me put something together. It would be on a Thursday before my Friday LPR talk. We could do it in the afternoon or in the evening. We could figure out how to do it. Colleen says yes with 3, 4, 5, 6 exclamation marks. Excellent. I'll be in touch. So let me figure out the logistics a little bit. But let's plan on I think it's the second Thursday in May. Let me pull up our calendar. Should be doing this in the middle of the show, I know. But yeah, May 8th. Let's plan May 8th from like 12 to 4 or 1 to 5, something like that. I might be doing something in the evening, but let's plan on afternoon. And we can try to, if you can help me round up about 10 people, about, I don't know, $400 each. So around $4,000 total. And we'll do it. If we can get 12, 13 people, make it a little cheaper. So yeah, let's plan on that. I'll be in touch. All right, next. All right, Emil. Hey, Yaron, where do I turn in this world in arms? What media sources, where do I turn in this world in arms? What media sources can be trusted in this oversaturated media landscape filled with dope and lies? You can't. This is why you listen to your Yaron Brook show. I mean, why do you need more? I think most of you overconsume the news. Most of you spend too much time thinking about and consuming news instead of spending time on things that are under your control, on making your life better, on improving your skills, improving your relationships with people. Spend an extra hour on work. Spend an extra hour on spoiling your wife. Spend an extra, or finding a wife. Spend an extra hour on playing with your kids. Spend an extra hour on doing something beneficial to your life, and don't consume news. Get your news for YBS. If there's a story that really interests you and you'd like to dig deeper, go do the research. But it takes so much time to figure out what's true and what's false and what's worthy and what's not, what's important and what's stupid. Let me do that work. Let me do it. And you spend the time in your life. You've only got one. You've only got one. Don't waste it on, what did Elon Musk say? What did Trump say? What is going on in Ukraine? Are the troops encircled? Is Kursk, are they all going to die? I mean, assume that if I'm not telling you, it's probably not that important. Now, I'm not perfect, so sometimes I'll make mistakes. And that most of what I tell you is true. I do my best to make it all true. And you know, that's the way you should approach this. Don't try to do it yourself. It's too time consuming and energy consuming and spirit consuming and optimism consuming, and go walk the dog, as Jennifer says. Robert Nasir quotes Henline as saying, budget the luxuries first. Chandler says, smoke some weed. I do not recommend that. Dulling the senses is not a solution to anything. All right, Andrew, what are some philosophical reasons why so many want to hang on to mysticism? Is it because reason is being maligned by the intellectuals such that people think they need to detach from the irrational faculty to survive? I think that's a big part of it. They've been taught that reason is impotent. Why spend so much time? Reason requires effort, choice, focus. And, reason is scary. So the psychology of fear. Fear is a powerful emotion. Reason is scary. It means you have to think for yourself. You can't just go with a group. You can't just go with a tribe. You can't just do what they say. So it's definitely the malign reason. It's that they haven't been taught to think. They're not expected to think. They haven't chosen to think. And mysticism is more comfortable in some bizarre sense, right? In some primitive sense. And mysticism is more tuned with the tribal attitude. And of course, religion is how they're brought up and how they're expected to behave and what is in their family. And it's what they've always done tradition-wise. And yeah, that's it. Paul says, do you think that Musk's mental deterioration is due to his drug use? I mean, that would be too much speculation. I mean, would it shock me? No, but I have no way of knowing. I mean, supposedly he takes ketamine, and ketamine is supposed to be nasty in terms of what it does to you if you take it too often. So, but I don't know. I don't know how much he takes. I don't know if he takes, who knows? So why speculate? But he's definitely deteriorating. Emil, why is equality unfair? Is it because it lowers everyone to the level of the least capable? Is the idea of equality noble even if the outcome is bad? No, because equality is unfair primarily because equality is anti-reality. Equality is equality of outcome, equality of abilities, equality. Rejects the very nature of reality, the very nature of man. It is rejected by perceptual level information. You don't even have to think to see that we're not all equal. So the striving towards equality is the rejection of the metaphysics of A is A. It's the rejection of truth. It's a rejection of obvious reality. It's the negation of causality. Think about the fact that each one of us brings about different outcomes through our behavior, through our actions, through our thinking. And those outcomes are not the same. To make them the same is to reject causality in reality. So it's a rejection of metaphysics. It's a rejection of reason. It's a rejection of the fact that most of our success in life is a consequence of our thinking, of our engagement with reality, of our mind, to negation of the fact that results in different things. There's nothing noble about rejecting reality. There's nothing noble about rejecting fact, causality. And of course, it's a rejection of free will. It's a rejection of the fact that we can determine who and what we are, up to a point. And then much of our success or failure is a consequence of our own choices. Right? So, no, I mean, equality is unfair in every dimension, morally, epistemologically, and metaphysically. It is a rejection of truth in every philosophical dimension. You're responsible for your success, and your success is going to be different than other people's. Some people are going to be more successful than you. It's not unfair that they're more successful. It's their choices that made them more successful. And it's their nature that made them more successful. And neither one of those is unfair. You can't say unfair with regard to nature. The only equality that's legitimate is political equality. People like to talk about equality all the time because egalitarianism is the dominant intellectual framework that people have today, sadly. But it's evil. Robert, if Dr. Ribbens can super chat just to say hi and send cryptic messages to philosophy at work, so can I. Oh, you're sending a cryptic message to philosophy at work? Grammar, Robert, grammar. Hello, KindredAmy. Let's head to New Orleans soon and do OCON Boston in style. And happy belated, Jennifer. Cool. So Robert has roped both Amy and Jennifer into this one. That is cool. And I don't know what New Zealand has to do with OCON. I thought you'd say, let's head to Vegas so we can make money and then do OCON in style. But yeah, anyway, that's just me interpreting. That was for Jennifer's birthday a few days ago. Yesterday, day before yesterday. I remember it was on the show, during the show. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate the support. Andrew, how do you explain the naivete of the right in believing that Putin will stick to his words? I don't think they are naive. I don't think they care about Putin sticking to his words. I think they just admire Putin and they want him to win. I think they're pro-Putin, fundamentally, deep down. The people who are not pro-Putin are the people who are skeptical and are anti and don't want to deal with Putin because they don't believe in. But most of the people on the right just want Putin to win and get it over with. Michael Sanders, they're treating human lives as mere units in a deadly equation. Is this the war that you're talking about? Yeah, it's sad. Michael says, you say evil is not that scheming or smart, but the Nazis were pretty scheming with what they created and sustained. I don't know if it was that scheming. I mean, they burned down the Reichstag and blamed it on the left. That was kind of scheming, but that's not that super sophisticated. It's not 3D chess. It's pretty straightforward. They came up with a final solution. That wasn't that sneaky. They assigned a committee to it. The committee came to made a recommendation, and they applied the recommendation. There's nothing very sophisticated. What really allowed the Nazis to do what they did is what we talked about earlier. The good in Germany, the good people of Germany not standing up and resisting them, and then the good outside of Germany, England, France, not standing up and resisting them. So all of the Nazi success was a consequence of the sanction of the victim. And business in Germany agreeing to cooperate with them instead of fighting them. In all cases, it is the good that facilitated the Nazis. The Nazis were not that smart, not that scheming, not that successful. The German economy was not successful. German military was ultimately not successful. I mean, how long did it last? 1,000-year Reich lasted, what, 5 years? Barely that. And it was crushed, not just defeated. Michael, does much of the upper crust of society have contempt for and hatred of the worldly things? No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what you mean by upper crust. The wealthy, they love their fancy cars and their beautiful condos and their beach resorts. And no, they don't. They love worldly things. They might not admit it. They might feel guilty about it. They might have this other intellectual dimension where they think it will be something else. But no, I don't think you can characterize it that way. I mean, look at how they behave. They're very worldly in a sense of materialistic. And some of it are materialistic, but I don't see them being non-worldly. I mean, again, the intellectuals maybe, the professors, but no, I don't know what you mean. By upper crust, I usually think of the rich. Okay, Michael S. asked, will 2028 be Newsom versus DeSantis? I don't know, but I doubt it's DeSantis. I don't think DeSantis has a chance, really. Now, I didn't think last time, and I don't think this time. He's not a good campaigner. He's not very charismatic. And he's pissed off MAGA in all kinds of ways. He ran against Trump. I'm not sure that's forgivable. I think the Republican will either be J.D. Vance or Trump Jr. J.D. Vance or Trump Jr. And I'm not sure it's Newsom. It could be, it could be Shapiro from Pennsylvania. It could be Whitmore from Michigan. I think it'll be a governor. Although you never know with Obama coming out of the Senate and sweeping into it, who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I have no idea how to make those predictions. Michael, the right seems more brutal with its statism. The left trickled it out and receives more pushback when they do. Yeah, the left is more sophisticated about it. It has what you'd call the establishment behind them. They can implement it in more subtle ways. The right doesn't have an establishment there. They don't have people at Columbia. They don't have people in different places. And the bureaucracy is all left. So the right, in a sense, has to be more brutal about it, more cutthroat, more definitive about it. So I think that's why. Michael says, you say you don't know how to time the market, but does Warren Buffett? Warren Buffett is the best I've ever seen. I don't know that he times the market so much as he times individual stocks. Remember, one of the great fortunes he made many, was to buy Coca-Cola when they changed the formula and it was a flop and their stock dove. He bought a bunch of it at the bottom. He bought a bunch of stock of like Bank of America and other banks at the bottom during the financial crisis and made a fortune. So he has been able to time individual stock bottoms. And indeed, Warren Buffett went into cash last year and is sitting on $300 billion worth of cash. So he timed this market. I don't know if he's buying now or when he will be buying, but he's the closest I know of somebody who has been successful at timing individual stocks at least, and sometimes the market. And even he has got it wrong sometimes and lost a lot of money as a consequence. Would you no longer do Rogan's show if invited? I don't know about Rogan. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I wouldn't do Tucker. Would I do Rogan? I probably would, because Rogan doesn't really ever take a stand, whereas Tucker does. But it's getting close with me with Rogan, given the kind of people he's had recently. Andrew, I wish smart, well-meaning people were more skeptical about the validity of hysterical ecological claims like the climate crisis. But maybe skepticism is the wrong concept. How do you think of it? I mean, I think you have to be questioning about what is really driving the agenda of the environmentalists. And whether, even if the science is true, is the agenda really driven by the science or is it driven by something else? And when you look at the environmental movement in particular, and how many times it's gone into a frenzy and panic over something, and how many times it's been wrong, you've got to be, skeptical is the right word. You've got to be skeptical. You've got to doubt. You've got to question. You've got to challenge. Their agenda, given their history, and given their explicit, if you read them and if you research it enough, their explicit motivations. Michael says, can the impoverished be more easily controlled? I don't know what that means. Why would you want to control the impoverished? And who is going to control? Can the impoverished be more easily controlled? I think making them dependent on the government makes them more easily controlled, if that's what you're asking. Yes, I think they can be because they're more dependent on the government. But notice how the non-impoverished, like tech billionaires these days, are being controlled by MAGA. Because they want to join that tribe. So intellectually, a lot of people can be controlled depending on whether the controller can feed their weaknesses. Colt, not to brag, but I'm improving my reading skills. I've read the Bible, Plato, and now I'm reading the Ominous Parallels. I need to work on my math, though. That's very good. Good for you. That's not bragging. Excellent that you're improving your reading skills, and those are all good reading assignments. OPA is another one you should try once you read Ominous Parallels. Leonard Peikoff's book, OPA, Objectivists, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, behind me there. Yes, improving math skills is good. That's also good. And there are lots of good. My guess is there's a lot of good AI that could help you with the math skills. Michael, are the Democrats just sitting back and letting Trump self-destruct? Will that strategy work? No, I think the Democrats are just overwhelmed. Indeed, Schumer today announced that he's going to vote for the continuing resolution so that the government won't shut down. So that's helping Trump. So they just don't know what to do. They don't know how to deal with it. And they don't have anything to say in response because they don't stand for anything. They're very, very empty. Very, very empty. Iridule. Have you heard of The Law of One? Worst New Age altruist collectivist book, New Age collectivist Bible. Horrible book. Many parallels with Anthem. Wow. I think I've heard of it, but I haven't read it, or I don't know any details, but it sounds horrific. Not surprising. Ian says, the recommendations on your website don't list Mr. Sunshine. Ooh, I need to fix that. Also, did you know there was a Matthew Perry TV show called Mr. Sunshine? It doesn't look good. No, I didn't know that. Well, maybe I did. I knew there was some other show called Mr. Sunshine because people have gotten confused, but I didn't know anything about it, and I don't know anything about it. Esoteric dichotomy. Hey, Yaron, are you able to do even more debates? Maybe even with other objectivists? What is the smallest show streamer? What is the smallest show streamer it is worth it to collab with? I don't know. I mean, I could do a lot of debates. Biggest challenge is to have people invite me. I can't just create debates out of thin air. I have to have people invite me, different debate societies, different debate events to debate, and I'm happy to do that. I've been on a lot of people's shows, lots of streamers, small, medium-sized streamers, and I'll be on more. I just did one with these. Turns out they were anti-vaxxers, and I got into a whole thing about that. But yeah, I mean, I go on a lot of shows. Raphael, if the source of evil is Kant, of all evil is Kant, that can't be right. And Kant is Christian, and Christianity is Plato, Plato's philosophy. Is there an original source where this all ends? Well, you can't do it. I mean, look, the source of evil is an individual's evasion. That's the source of evil. Now, if you're looking for, philosophical, where's the origins of philosophical evil bad? Yeah, I mean, it probably starts with Plato, and gets exacerbated by Christianity, and then gets put on steroids by Kant. But that doesn't mean they're all the same. But the source is probably Plato, just because he's the first to really articulate well some very bad ideas. Friend Harper, we are like day traders in the realm of news. Yaron Brook is a professional investor in the news. That is right. That's right. You shouldn't day trade. Max, you've referred to Trump as the ultimate pragmatist. Would you say the same about Trumpism as a movement, or would you relate it more to nihilism, cynicism, and other philosophical postures? I think I agree basically with Greg that I'm wrong about calling him the ultimate pragmatist, because he's not even a pragmatist. He shouldn't be labeled with a philosophy. I think he's much more nihilist, which is the negation of philosophy, negation of ideas, and a much more kind of a mafioso mentality. I think the same is true of MAGA. MAGA is a tribe that is geared towards hatred and fear and emotionalism and worship of Trump, but also worship of everything that's anti-left, and really fear of the future and progress and success and prosperity. I really do think that MAGA is more an emotional response than and that is motivated by religion and Christianity. It's not an accident. MAGA is dominated by evangelicals, the more emotional of the Christian religions. And it's emotionalism. And certainly there's an element of nihilism there. So I think that would be the way I would frame it. Christian, how preventing becoming dependent on a mercantile nation for certain goods? especially necessary for defense production, eventually planning to attack one day your terror-free nation. How do you prevent becoming dependent on a mercantile nation? Well, so by being free and by having zero tariffs, you trade with everybody. You don't just trade with the mercantile nation. You trade with everybody. And the mercantile nation will, over time, decline in its power and significance, and therefore decline in how much it'll export to you. And when it comes to real issues of national defense, either make sure to build the stuff you need for national defense domestically, or make sure that the sources of material for national defense are sourced from a diverse locations, so that you don't place yourself at the behest, at the whim of one particular nation. I think that's all you can do. And the smaller you are, the more dependent you're going to be on the one big power in the region or whatever. That's just a reality. It's one of the reasons alliances are good, particularly for the small guys. And why maybe it doesn't make sense to be a small guy. Maybe there should be fewer bigger countries. All right, last comment. Ribbens says, Happy Pie Day all. And she doesn't mean the kind of pie that you eat. She means the pie that is 3.41? I don't know what, it's the something to do with the circumference and the diameter of a circle. I used to know the formula, but Ribbens will make fun of me because I can't remember the formula. 3.1415. Okay, 3.1415, not 4114. 3.1459. Guys, get it together. David, Ian, figure it out. 3.14, okay. So today is March 41st. All right, it's March 14th, 314. All right, I know, I'm slow. I didn't get that that's why it's Pi Day. Now I get why it's Pi Day, and I'll probably remember it for the rest of my life. It's 314 is pi. Okay, 22 divided by 7. All right. Thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. Reminder to become a supporter of the show on Patreon. I see pretty much every day somebody adds, which I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. So please consider supporting the show on Patreon and becoming a monthly supporter. And what else do I want to tell you? Colleen, I'll be in touch about Denver. And the rest of you, I will see you tomorrow for a show on the Constitution. Monday, no show. Tuesday, probably no show. If there is one, it'll be very early. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, definitely shows. See you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody.